Have you ever wondered why the most profound truths often come wrapped in jest? Why the court jester could speak what kings dared not whisper? Today we dive deep into one of Carl Jung's most fascinating, yet overlooked archetypal figures, the wise fool. This paradoxical character holds secrets that could transform how you understand wisdom, enlightenment, and your own journey toward wholeness. Jung believed that within each of us lives a constellation of archetypal energies, and the wise fool represents something extraordinary, the marriage of innocence and insight, of playfulness and profundity. Unlike the traditional sage who speaks in measured tones from mountaintops, the wise fool dances on the edge of chaos, revealing truth through contradiction and awakening through apparent absurdity. Picture this archetype in your mind. It's the figure who laughs at what others take seriously, who finds the sacred in the profane, who speaks in riddles that somehow make perfect sense. The wise fool doesn't seek to impress with elaborate philosophies or complex theories. Instead, they pierce through illusion with the sharp blade of humor, revealing what Jung called the divine comedy of human existence. But why does this matter to you? Because in a world that often demands we choose between being serious or playful, intellectual or intuitive, the wise fool shows us a third way. They demonstrate that true wisdom doesn't come from accumulating knowledge or maintaining rigid composure. It emerges from embracing paradox, from dancing with uncertainty, from finding the light hidden within our own darkness. Jung discovered that the wise fool appears in dreams and fantasies when the psyche is ready for breakthrough. When we become too attached to our personas, too identified with our roles and responsibilities, this archetype emerges to shake us awake. It's the part of us that remembers play as sacred, that laughter can be a form of prayer, that sometimes the deepest truths sound like jokes. Think about the great spiritual teachers throughout history. Many of them embodied this wise fool energy. Buddha's gentle smile in the face of suffering. Jesus turning tables in temples while blessing children. Socrates claiming to know nothing while exposing everyone else's ignorance. They understood something profound, that rigid seriousness can become its own prison, and sometimes wisdom wears the mask of foolishness. The wise fool teaches us about what Jung called enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposites. The person who takes themselves too seriously becomes foolish. The one who embraces their foolishness often becomes wise. This isn't mere intellectual wordplay. It's a fundamental principle of psychological transformation. When you encounter the wise fool in your own psyche, it might manifest as sudden urges to laugh at inappropriate moments, to question everything you once held sacred, to find absurdity in what others consider profound. Don't dismiss these impulses. They're often signals that your soul is ready to break free from limiting beliefs and rigid patterns. The modern world has largely forgotten the value of the wise fool. We live in an age of experts and specialists where authority comes from credentials and wisdom is measured by degrees. But Jung understood that this approach misses something essential. The wise fool reminds us that true insight often comes not from those who know the most, but from those who know how to see with fresh eyes. Consider how children naturally embody this archetype. They ask questions that make adults uncomfortable, point out contradictions that everyone else ignores, find wonder in the ordinary. The wise fool is, in many ways, the child who never forgot how to play with reality, who never lost the ability to see the emperor's new clothes for what they really are, nothing at all. But the wise fool isn't just about external expression. It's about developing an internal relationship with uncertainty, with not knowing, with the vast mystery of existence. When you can laugh at your own certainties, when you can hold your beliefs lightly, when you can find humor in your most serious concerns, you're touching this archetypal energy. Jung observed that people who integrate the wise fool often become more creative, more spontaneous, more alive. They develop what he called beginner's mind, the ability to approach familiar situations with fresh perspective. They become comfortable with contradiction, skilled at finding the third option when everyone else sees only two choices. This archetype also serves as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious minds. The wise fool speaks the language of dreams, symbols, and metaphors. They understand that truth isn't always logical, that wisdom doesn't always make sense to the rational mind. Through humor and play, They create openings for insights that might otherwise be rejected by our defensive ego structures. The path of the wise fool isn't always easy. Society often punishes those who refuse to take its game seriously, who point out its contradictions, who laugh at its sacred cows. The wise fool may be misunderstood, marginalized, dismissed as eccentric or irrelevant, but Jung believed this was precisely their power. They operate outside conventional systems of validation and control. In therapeutic work, Jung found that patients who could access their inner wise fool often made rapid progress. They became less attached to their problems, more playful with their symptoms, better able to see the humor in their own neuroses. This wasn't denial or avoidance. It was a profound shift in perspective that allowed healing to occur naturally. The wise fool also understands the power of inversions. They know that sometimes you have to go backward to move forward, that descent often precedes ascent, that breakdown can be breakthrough in disguise. They're comfortable with upside-down logic because they understand that the psyche operates according to different rules than the rational mind. This archetype particularly emerges during midlife transitions when people begin questioning the values and goals they've pursued for decades. The wise fool appears to help dismantle outdated structures, to reveal the absurdity of certain pursuits, to point toward more authentic ways of being. They're the voice that whispers, "What if none of this really matters the way you think it does?" But integration of the wise fool requires discernment. There's a difference between wise foolishness and mere foolishness, between sacred humor and destructive cynicism. The authentic wise fool's laughter comes from love, not bitterness. Their questioning stems from genuine curiosity, not nihilistic doubt. They seek to liberate, not to tear down for its own sake. Jung also noted that the wise fool often appears during times of collective crisis, when entire societies need their assumptions challenged. They're the voice of sanity in insane times, the one who points out that the emperor's new clothes are actually invisible. In our current era of information overload and ideological polarization, the wise fool's perspective is more relevant than ever. The practical implications of embracing your inner wise fool are profound. You might find yourself taking life less seriously while paradoxically caring more deeply about what truly matters. You might develop greater resilience in the face of adversity, finding ways to laugh even in difficult circumstances. You might become more creative in solving problems, approaching challenges from unexpected angles. This archetype also helps with what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. Instead of rushing to resolve contradictions or choose sides, the wise fool can sit comfortably in the space between, finding wisdom in paradox, truth in apparent contradiction. This capacity becomes increasingly important as we navigate a complex world that rarely offers simple answers. The wise fool teaches us that enlightenment doesn't have to be solemn. Awakening can be playful, joyful, even hilarious. Some of the deepest spiritual insights come not through earnest seeking, but through spontaneous recognition. Sudden understanding that makes you laugh out loud at the cosmic joke you've been missing all along. In relationships, integrating the wise fool can be transformative. Instead of being triggered by others' behaviors, you might find yourself amused by the human comedy, including your own role in it. This doesn't mean becoming detached or uncaring, but rather developing what Jung called loving detachment, the ability to care deeply while holding outcomes lightly. The wise fool also helps us navigate the phenomenon Jung called inflation, the tendency to become too identified with our personas, our achievements, our spiritual attainments. When we start taking ourselves too seriously, the wise fool appears to deflate our pretensions, to remind us of our fundamental humanity, to help us laugh at our own absurdity. This archetype is particularly relevant for those on spiritual paths who might become trapped in what some call spiritual materialism, the unconscious use of spiritual practices to enhance the ego rather than transcend it. The wise fool cuts through such pretension with the sword of laughter, revealing the absurdity of using enlightenment techniques to avoid actual enlightenment. Jung observed that the wise fool often emerges most strongly in people who have suffered deeply and found ways to transform their pain into wisdom. They've learned that humor can be a form of alchemy, transmuting lead into gold, transforming suffering into compassion, changing wounds into doorways. They understand that sometimes the deepest healing comes not from fixing ourselves, but from laughing at the very idea that we're broken. The integration of this archetype also involves developing what we might call sacred irreverence, the ability to question authority, challenge assumptions, and think independently while maintaining respect for genuine wisdom and authentic spiritual insight. The wise fool knows the difference between iconoclasm for its own sake and the careful dismantling of false idols. In creative endeavors, the wise fool energy can be invaluable. It's the part of us that's willing to look foolish, to experiment, to play with possibilities without attachment to outcomes. Many great artists, writers, and innovators have accessed this archetypal energy, allowing their inner child to dance with their adult wisdom to create something genuinely new. The wise fool also serves as a guardian against dogmatism and fundamentalism of all kinds. They're naturally suspicious of anyone who claims to have all the answers, who insists there's only one way to truth, who demands rigid adherence to any system of belief. They understand that truth is too vast and mysterious to be captured by any single perspective. As we near the end of our exploration, it's worth considering how you might begin integrating the wise fool into your own life. Start by noticing where you take yourself too seriously. Where do you hold rigid beliefs that might benefit from gentle questioning? Where do you need permission to play, to experiment, to look foolish in service of growth? Practice finding humor in your own contradictions and inconsistencies. Instead of judging yourself for being human, laugh with compassion at the comedy of the human condition. Develop beginner's mind in areas where you consider yourself expert. Allow yourself to not know, to be curious, to ask naive questions that might reveal profound truths. The wise fool reminds us that the path to enlightenment isn't necessarily a solemn march up a mountain. Sometimes it's a playful dance through a garden, sometimes a laughing tumble down a hillside, sometimes a joyful leap into the unknown. The destination remains the same: integration, wholeness, authentic being, but the journey can be infused with lightness, humor, and joy. Jung believed that when we can embrace our inner wise fool, we become more whole, more creative, more alive. We develop the capacity to hold life lightly while living it fully, to care deeply while attachment to outcomes loosely, to seek truth while remaining open to surprise. In a world that often seems too serious for its own good, the wise fool offers a different way, a path that honors both wisdom and wonder, both depth and delight. The next time you find yourself taking life too seriously, remember the wise fool. Let them whisper in your ear, reminding you that existence is both profound and absurd, meaningful and meaningless, sacred and silly, all at the same time. And in that paradox, in that divine comedy, you might just find the key to enlightenment you've been seeking all along.